The Dutch Empire, spanning from the late 16th to the early 19th century, represents a pivotal chapter in European colonial history. Emerging as a formidable maritime power during the Golden Age of the Netherlands, the Dutch Empire extended its reach across continents, reshaping global trade, politics, and cultural exchange. This essay examines the profound economic, political, and cultural impacts of the Dutch Empire on global history, highlighting its contributions to the development of modern capitalism, international diplomacy, and the diffusion of ideas and technologies across the world. Through an exploration of its economic strategies, political innovations, and cultural interactions, this essay seeks to illuminate how the Dutch Empire not only expanded European influence but also forged enduring legacies that continue to resonate in contemporary global affairs. The origins of the Dutch Empire trace back to the ambitious maritime ventures of Dutch explorers and traders during the late 16th and early 17th centuries. Motivated by the promise of lucrative trade in spices and luxury goods from the East Indies, Dutch sailors navigated perilous seas, establishing trade routes that would eventually reshape global commerce. Central to this expansion was the formation of the Dutch East India Company, VOC, in 1602. Endowed with quasi-governmental powers by the States General of the Netherlands, the VOC became the world's first multinational corporation, granted a monopoly on trade and colonization in Asia. This marked a significant departure from traditional state-sponsored expeditions, as private enterprise now wielded considerable influence over Dutch colonial ambitions. The VOC's establishment heralded a new era of Dutch expansion into Southeast Asia, with Indonesia, known then as the Dutch East Indies, emerging as the centerpiece of their colonial enterprise. Dutch trading posts and fortresses dotted the archipelago, serving as nodes for the extraction and shipment of spices such as nutmeg, cloves, and pepper. The VOC's approach to colonization was pragmatic, focusing on securing key trading outposts and forging alliances with local rulers to facilitate trade and protect Dutch interests. This strategy not only solidified Dutch control over the spice trade but also laid the groundwork for a colonial administration that would endure for centuries. Simultaneously, Dutch expansion extended westward across the Atlantic Ocean. In North America, the Dutch established New Amsterdam, present-day New York City, in 1624, strategically positioned at the mouth of the Hudson River. Initially founded as a trading post, New Amsterdam quickly grew into a bustling commercial hub, attracting settlers from diverse European backgrounds and indigenous peoples alike. In South America, Dutch efforts to establish a foothold in Brazil led to the creation of Dutch Brazil in the early 17th century. Although short-lived, Dutch Brazil represented a significant chapter in Dutch colonial ambitions, showcasing their efforts to challenge Portuguese dominance in the region. Central to the economic might of the Dutch Empire was the Dutch East India Company, VOC, established in 1602. The VOC operated as a unique entity, combining commercial enterprise with governmental authority granted by the Dutch Republic. Organized as a joint stock company, the VOC was structured with a hierarchical management system that included directors, governors, and local representatives in its overseas territories. The VOC's primary objective was to monopolize trade routes to Asia, particularly the lucrative spice trade originating from the Indonesian archipelago. By establishing fortified trading posts and negotiating exclusive trading privileges with local rulers, the VOC effectively controlled production, distribution, and pricing of spices such as nutmeg, cloves, and cinnamon. This dominance not only generated immense wealth for the Dutch Republic but also secured its position as a global economic powerhouse. The economic strategies employed by the VOC had far-reaching implications for global trade patterns during the early modern period. By leveraging its monopoly on Asian commodities, the VOC facilitated a network of trade routes that connected Europe, Asia, and the Americas. Dutch ships, known for their efficiency and capacity, transported spices, textiles, porcelain, and other goods across vast distances, enriching Amsterdam and other Dutch ports. Furthermore, the VOC's model of trade and colonial governance influenced European economic policies, fostering competition among European powers seeking to emulate Dutch success. This competitive environment spurred innovations in finance, shipping, and commerce that propelled Europe into a new era of economic expansion and globalization. Amsterdam emerged as the epicenter of the Dutch Empire's economic activities and played a pivotal role in shaping global capitalism. As the headquarters of the VOC and a leading financial center, Amsterdam attracted merchants, investors, and skilled laborers from across Europe. The city's stock exchange, established in 1602 alongside the VOC, became the world's first official stock market, facilitating the trading of VOC shares and financing colonial ventures. The Dutch Republic's embrace of free market principles, coupled with a culture of entrepreneurship and innovation, fostered an environment conducive to economic growth and prosperity. Amsterdam's banking institutions pioneered modern financial instruments such as insurance, futures contracts, and joint stock companies, laying the groundwork for modern capitalism. In summary, Amsterdam's rise as a financial hub underpinned the Dutch Empire's economic success and contributed to its lasting impact on global trade, finance, and economic theory. The Dutch Golden Age, 17th century, was a period of unparalleled cultural achievement in the Netherlands, fueled by the economic prosperity and global influence of the Dutch Empire. Artists such as Rembrandt van Rijn, Johannes Vermeer, and Frans Hals produced masterpieces that captured everyday life, landscapes, and portraits with a level of realism and introspection that defined Dutch Baroque art. Literature flourished as well, with notable writers like Joost van den Vondel and Constantin Huygens contributing to Dutch literature's golden era. The rise of the printing press facilitated the dissemination of ideas and literature, fostering a vibrant literary culture that celebrated Dutch identity and intellectual inquiry. The Dutch Empire's commitment to exploration and trade bolstered scientific advancements in navigation, cartography, and natural sciences. Dutch explorers, funded by the VOC and other trading companies, ventured into uncharted waters, mapping coastlines and discovering new territories across the globe. Prominent cartographers such as Willem Bleu and Joan Bleu produced detailed maps that revolutionized navigation and provided accurate representations of the world known at the time. These maps not only facilitated safe passage for Dutch ships but also contributed to the expansion of geographic knowledge. Advancements in navigation techniques, including the refinement of latitude and longitude measurements, improved the accuracy of sea voyages and facilitated global trade networks. Dutch innovations in shipbuilding and maritime technology, such as the development of the Vloot ship, optimized cargo capacity and enhanced sailing efficiency. The Dutch Republic's policy of religious tolerance played a crucial role in fostering intellectual exchange and cultural diversity during the Dutch Golden Age. Unlike many European powers of the time, the Dutch Republic welcomed religious refugees and dissenters, including Jews, Huguenots, and Catholics fleeing persecution elsewhere. This atmosphere of tolerance and religious freedom attracted scholars, artists, and thinkers from across Europe, contributing to a vibrant intellectual community in cities like Amsterdam, Leiden, and Utrecht. The University of Leiden, founded in 1575, became a center for scientific inquiry and scholarship, attracting luminaries such as René Descartes and Hugo Grotius. The exchange of ideas among scholars and intellectuals of different religious and cultural backgrounds fueled innovations in philosophy, natural sciences, and political theory. This intellectual ferment not only enriched Dutch society but also contributed to broader European Enlightenment ideals that shaped the course of Western intellectual history. The Dutch Empire's colonial administration was characterized by a mix of paternalistic governance, collaboration with local elites, and occasional conflict with indigenous populations. The VOC and later Dutch colonial authorities employed a hierarchical system of governance that aimed to maintain control over colonial territories while maximizing economic returns. Paternalism was a prominent feature of Dutch colonial rule, where Dutch administrators often portrayed themselves as benevolent overseers responsible for the welfare and development of indigenous populations. This approach was partly pragmatic, as the VOC relied on local labor and resources to sustain its commercial enterprises in regions like the Dutch East Indies, Indonesia. Local collaboration played a crucial role in Dutch colonial governance. The VOC established alliances with indigenous rulers and elites, granting them privileges in exchange for political loyalty and economic cooperation. This strategy allowed the Dutch to consolidate power and maintain stability in their overseas territories, albeit at the expense of indigenous autonomy and sovereignty. However, Dutch colonial rule was not without conflict. Resistance movements, often led by indigenous leaders or communities disillusioned with Dutch policies, occasionally erupted into violent confrontations. These conflicts, whether sparked by economic exploitation, cultural oppression, or resistance to Dutch authority, underscored the complexities and tensions inherent in colonial administration. Colonial rule profoundly influenced social hierarchies and societal structures in Dutch-occupied territories. The imposition of Dutch legal systems, land tenure policies, and taxation schemes often marginalized indigenous communities, disrupting traditional social and economic networks. In regions like Indonesia, where the cultivation of cash crops like spices and coffee was prioritized for export, local populations faced displacement from fertile lands and economic exploitation by Dutch planters and traders. This economic stratification exacerbated social inequalities and contributed to tensions between indigenous communities and Dutch settlers. Furthermore, Dutch colonial policies often reinforced racial hierarchies, with Europeans occupying top positions in colonial society while indigenous peoples and enslaved Africans were relegated to subordinate roles. This hierarchical system perpetuated discriminatory practices and cultural assimilation efforts aimed at erasing indigenous identities and traditions. Indonesia, Dutch East Indies. The VOC's control over the spice trade in Indonesia led to the establishment of a plantation economy reliant on forced labor and coercive labor practices. This system not only transformed the social fabric of Indonesian society but also left a legacy of economic dependency and cultural disruption. South Africa. Dutch colonization at the Cape of Good Hope laid the foundation for racial segregation and apartheid policies that persisted well into the 20th century. The Dutch East India Company and later Dutch settlers imposed strict racial classifications and land dispossession measures that marginalized indigenous Khoikhoi and San populations. The Caribbean. Dutch involvement in the Caribbean, particularly in colonies like Suriname and Curaçao, focused on sugar production and the use of enslaved labor from Africa. This exploitation contributed to demographic shifts and cultural syncretism, shaping the ethnic and social landscape of the region. In the 18th and early 19th centuries, several factors contributed to the gradual decline of the Dutch Empire. Economic mismanagement, exacerbated by costly wars and competition from other European powers, strained the financial resources of the Dutch Republic. The VOC, once a symbol of Dutch economic prowess, faced internal corruption and inefficiencies that eroded its profitability and diminished its influence in Asian trade networks. Military defeats, such as the loss of Dutch Brazil to the Portuguese in 1654 and repeated conflicts with the English, weakened Dutch territorial holdings and maritime supremacy. Despite its decline as a colonial power, the Dutch Empire left a lasting legacy that continues to resonate in global history. The legal systems established by the Dutch, characterized by principles of religious tolerance and commercial law, influenced legal frameworks in former Dutch colonies and beyond. Dutch remains an official language in several former colonies, reflecting the linguistic legacy of Dutch settlement and administration. Architecturally, Dutch colonial cities and forts in Southeast Asia and Africa bear testament to Dutch engineering and urban planning practices, integrating European and indigenous architectural styles. The cultural influences of the Dutch Empire are evident in the syncretic traditions and cultural exchanges that emerged in regions under Dutch control. In Indonesia, for example, Dutch colonial rule introduced European art forms, culinary traditions, and educational systems that coexisted with indigenous customs. The impact of Dutch education and Protestant missionary activities contributed to social transformations and the spread of literacy in colonial societies. In a comparative analysis with other European colonial powers, the Dutch Empire stood out for its pragmatic approach to governance and trade. Unlike the Spanish or Portuguese empires, which focused on extraction of precious metals and forced labor, the Dutch prioritized commerce and established cooperative relationships with local elites. This approach often led to greater stability and economic prosperity in Dutch colonies compared to regions under more exploitative colonial regimes. However, the legacy of Dutch colonialism also includes enduring challenges, such as post-colonial socio-economic disparities and cultural identity debates in former colonies. The Dutch Empire, spanning from its zenith in the 17th century to its gradual decline in the 18th and 19th centuries, has left an indelible mark on global history. Economically, the Dutch Empire revolutionized trade routes and commerce, laying the groundwork for modern capitalism with innovations such as joint stock companies and stock exchanges. The VOC's dominance in the spice trade reshaped global economic patterns and established Amsterdam as a financial hub of international significance. Culturally, the Dutch Golden Age witnessed unparalleled artistic and literary achievements, contributing to the broader European Renaissance. Scientific advancements in navigation and cartography, facilitated by Dutch explorers and scholars, expanded the known boundaries of the world and enriched global knowledge. However, the legacy of the Dutch Empire is not without its complexities. Colonialism, by its nature, involved the exploitation of resources, labor, and indigenous cultures. The imposition of European legal systems and socio-economic structures often marginalized local populations and perpetuated social hierarchies that persist in post-colonial societies today. The enduring legacies of Dutch colonialism include linguistic influences, architectural landmarks, and cultural syncretism that continue to shape the identities and landscapes of former Dutch colonies. Reflecting on the complexities of colonialism prompts a critical examination of power dynamics, cultural exchange, and the enduring impacts of historical injustices. The Dutch Empire's legacy serves as a reminder of the intertwined histories of exploitation and innovation, cooperation and conflict, that have shaped our modern world. It challenges us to confront the legacies of inequality and injustice inherited from colonialism while acknowledging the contributions and resilience of diverse cultures and societies affected by Dutch expansion. In conclusion, the Dutch Empire's economic, cultural, and political impacts have left a profound and lasting imprint on global history. By exploring its complexities and legacies, we gain insights into the complexities of colonial encounters and the ongoing challenges of forging equitable and inclusive societies in a globalized world.